started. So look, thanks so much everyone for joining me today. I'm really grateful for your time. This is our first webinar for 2021. A couple of you with us today have been on one of our webinars, or two of them last year. I chose today's topic as recently we've noticed that there seems to be an appetite for some creative ideas on how to keep up with customer education and what is key to establish a consistent learning platform when travel and access is limited compared to what it used to be. So over the past year, clinician education has adapted from primarily a face-to-face experience into a remote or hybrid learning experience. And technology has made it possible for pharmaceutical and medical device companies to stay connected from anywhere while opening up new possibilities for delivering impactful education and training in support of the safe and effective use of products and solutions. So to discuss the future of clinical education, I'm very happy to introduce today's panel of industry leaders. We have Danielle Dowell, the Executive Director of Securus, which is owned by CSL. Greg Luck, the Managing Director of Fujifilm Sonosite. We have Alex Thompson, who's the Managing Director of Medline. And we have Jonathan Primmer, who's the General Manager of Abbott Vascular. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me today. I'm very grateful, as I'm sure our 140 participants are that are with us today. So let's get started. So we've been having many recent conversations with our pharma and medical device clients around primary care, hospital and clinic access and how this is affecting pharma and device companies to engage with their customers like they did pre-COVID, especially in relation to adding value for through delivering impactful education and training. And I just wondered how that's affected your business. And I'll start with ladies first. So Danny, if you'd like me to repeat that, let me know, but did you get that?
No, I did get it, and it has certainly, I mean, it's affected our business, obviously through COVID. It was difficult from an access and a communication point of view to continue to add the value that I think probably across all our organisations we feel we do add to our customers, and certainly it proved difficult. And being we're Melbourne based as an organisation, I think Melbourne sort of in and out of lockdown made it even more difficult. The flip side is what COVID has done is it has, I think, pushed pharmaceuticals to start to think a little bit more innovatively and embrace digital and multi-channel communication with our customers a lot more proactively, certainly from our organisation's point of view, than perhaps we were in a space of thinking about it prior to COVID. And that's challenged us across some of our departments as well around, how if commercial wants to be able to have that virtual access and partner with customers in a different way, how do we do that in an appropriate way, making sure that we're within the code, also that we're from a privacy and a social media perspective, we're doing it appropriately and staying ahead of the curve, which I think pharmaceuticals traditionally has found it quite difficult. So it's been a positive from that perspective because it's forced us internally as an organisation to have dialogue around how do we do this better and how do we plan to be able to do it better. And I say plan because I think we don't know where we're landing at the moment post-COVID. I think some areas are opening up and getting a little bit more back to whatever normal is. But until we get more of a rhythm, it's hard to really understand how do we maximise this. And I think the organisation that gets that sort of hybrid model of face-to-face and virtual right is the one that's going to do the best. And I'm still, certainly internally, we're still trying to work out what that looks like. And I think our customers are as well. Our customers are telling us that they want to go back to face-to-face, but then when we're doing the virtual, that's not what we're seeing either. So I think we're still in a bit of an interim period around working out how do we maximise this. That's sort of, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I've posed a lot of questions as well, which I'm sure Jonathan and Greg and Alex have some opinions on.
Yeah, no, that's great, Danny. Thank you. And yes, certainly what you've just said, there's some more questions on that as we go through today. So we'll probably cover all of that. So thanks so much. So Jonathan, what are your thoughts around that? Do you want me to read the question again?
No, I think I got most of it. And Danielle covered a lot of good points here. I think for the med device area, we've seen, I mean, there's been immense disruption and also innovation in med devices that's happened in the last year. That's in areas like diagnostics, of course, and vaccines has been huge, of course, and but in areas of telehealth and some adjunct technologies like VR technology and Hololens and others that are allowing more, I guess, interactive multi-channel experiences, because our biggest challenge in med device has been of course, the access and respecting protocols of hospitals, making sure that that there's new ways of doing things that don't involve that face-to-face, that can be augmented with virtual training. So we went from overnight pretty much having that access into hospitals where needed to support cases to having to find new ways of doing things. And there's been some great innovations, I think, in the last year that have come in conjunction with the device changes that we've seen that have helped augment some of those trainings and proctoring and all sorts of in-services in hospitals. So,
okay, thank you, Alex. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting because I think that there are going to be some differences depending on the industry, and I think out of today's discussion you'll see that we're facing similar problems, but I think there'll be some differences within those. Yeah, I think to the point that Jonathan and Danny have made, last year really forced our team to think about how do we maintain connection with customers, and given that there's previously been an opportunity to build relationships by face-to-face contact and that was just removed, then I think that we've had to think on our feet around how do we maintain connection and relationship and add value to customers. I think respecting the fact that, you know, for the first half or first 3 quarters of last year, the requirement for education in our space changed significantly, and actually the interest was not really in education on the product, it was in access to inventory and supplies. That was really the absolute priority, and I think the education piece was really more focused on the infection prevention protocols around COVID, and I think everyone was, you know, probably treading new ground in that space, in the healthcare worker space. By Q3, I think that we had pivoted and started to think about using technology like we're using today to find ways to engage customers. You know, I think that we saw the peak of the pandemic in Australia probably sort of drops around Q3, maybe with the exception of Victoria, who was still living through it. But we undertook some voice of customer activities with our team, and had them engaged with dialogue around what it was people actually wanted, both in the forms of education and also just in terms of how we could support them and add value. So, and I think that some of that will stay, and we'll probably get into that this morning, and I think some of that will probably change. And to Danny's point, I think there's probably no replacement for face-to-face. I think that'll probably continue to be a requirement, and I think that finding that balance again between how you engage customers face-to-face, how you engage with them and add value online will be something that we're all going to be challenged by.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Thank you, Alex. Greg?
Yeah, for us, it was a really double-edged sword for us. It was tough. In the device field, we were one of the businesses that really benefited from COVID, sadly. So we had a lot of equipment going into facilities that absolutely requires kind of hands-on training and orientation. And we were obviously limited by the ability to go in. So I had to really pivot our business quickly and get ourselves technically set up for my clinical team to be able to do this as best we can remotely. It affected our customers obviously more than our business, because they were struggling to get the education that they needed. They weren't set up technically in most hospitals with education rooms, cameras, and all that sort of thing. So it was a slow burn for us to get it going. The first half of the year, we worked a lot to get the technology set up so that we could, you know, roll a machine into a room, have cameras and lights, and our clinical team being able to broadcast a level of training. And it needed to be live, so it needed to be interaction. And, you know, you start going down the path of many limitations, you know, broadband and cameras at their end and technology at their end. And you can have the best setup in the world, your end, but it's very much reliant at the customer end. So it took a lot of planning to achieve what we needed to contractually. When we sell a piece of equipment, we're bound to contractually deliver X amount of training. So it took a lot of work and planning to get them to work with us through the absolute lockdowns. And even when it wasn't that lockdown, hospitals were reluctant to have staff going in, and frankly, if there was a big installation, I was reluctant to send more than one person in, because if something happened in terms of COVID, I'd have more staff out of my business too. So it took a lot of planning to deliver what we needed to deliver, really.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so moving on, the latest MTAA report tells us that 400,000 healthcare practitioners are trained by medtech companies each year in APAC. We are hearing that some customers are very open to new learning initiatives that companies are developing, and some are reluctant to want to change how education is delivered. How have you dealt with this, and how have your customers responded to this, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. So I think the one thing that we hear from a lot of doctors is they're really looking forward to getting back and connecting at the big meetings, and they're missing that interaction, that vital the networks they build for fellows to meet their future professors and profs to meet their former fellows, and so that part of it is really, I think, missed that physical connection. And I don't think there's any reticence to take up, as Greg and Danny and Alex were saying, there's no real reticence to take it up. I think it's just a lot of infrastructure issues at the moment, and a lot of the technology is it's kind of built for 2019, and we're trying to put PowerPoints onto screens and asking everyone, is my PowerPoint up yet, and these sort of things. So we've I think we're trying to adapt, whereas I think the future will be a lot more one-click interactive, a mix of virtual reality and some other areas that can really improve those experiences. But at this stage, I think there's been quite an eagerness to jump on board with the virtual format from the comfort of their own rooms to have these virtual conferences, but then they'd like to supplement that with the face-to-face. So I think in the future you'll see a segmented sort of tailored approach that will use multi-channels, but certainly not a reluctance.
Okay, fantastic. Alex, how have your customers found it? Have they been reluctant, or have they been open to it?
Yeah, no, it's I agree with Jonathan's comments. Actually, I think that notwithstanding some of the hardware and technology access issues, I think that's been some feedback that we've certainly heard. And in certain facilities, certain organisations, clinical rooms last year and education rooms were converted into storage rooms as hospitals tried to pivot on reshuffling theatres, and we were preparing ourselves for something that looked a lot like Europe and the US, which unfortunately never happened. But I think one of the other bits of feedback that I found interesting, I think there was probably a preconceived idea that there would be some competency gaps around how to use some of this technology, and I don't think any of that has been really founded. I think that people's ability to adapt to this type of technology has actually been very, very good. And so I don't see that as an inhibitor moving forward, but I do think some of the hardware and accessibility issues around laptops and cameras and microphones has caused challenges that will probably work itself out. We ran an education session actually by some clinicians of our team only just a couple of weeks ago for our conference, which was tremendously successful. We had a cardiologist in New Zealand, and we had a cath lab nurse here in Sydney, talking to staff of Medline all over Australia, and they were using slides and videos and holograms, and it was seamless. It was fantastic. So I think it can work very effectively. I think that the key will always be preparation and adding value, and I don't think that was any different whether we were online or whether we're face to face. I think that the need to be able to deliver quality education that's of value to the audience is going to be absolutely paramount, probably more so than it was before, because those sort of ad hoc interactions that happen when people are just in a facility, I think that's the bit that's been restricted. So
yeah,
it just requires more.
Yeah, yeah, and that's, I think, too, where they tend to be able to just have those corridor conversations or water cooler conversations, as people are saying, and it's the same as being in an office when those conversations get missed now. And that's a nice thing about being in talking to your customers, being able to walk through the hospital. But yeah, obviously not so much anymore, unfortunately. But that sounds really positive, what you just described, is that at the conference there where you've had the cath lab nurse and the cardiologist. That sounds fantastic, Alex. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, our customers have had to be open to the whole virtual world because of the scenario, right? So what we started doing is, after every education session with an individual or with a group, we got feedback directly after that. So we asked them, what went right, what went wrong, and we started changing things as we went, to a point that we believe we've got it right from our side now. Our customers, we've all got lots of information on the web and in the cloud, lots of education information. But what we found, we had it in various places: YouTube channels, Sonosot Institutes, access through apps, etc. And we needed to pull that together. So we did that as a company quite early in the piece. We consolidated, and we had one place for education online. And then we used that as part of our remote training. So we direct people to a particular module that ordinarily we would do face-to-face, so that when we got to the remote piece, that kind of that theoretical side had already hopefully been taken care of, and we would just recap, and then we would go into the practical hands-on live scenario. So our customers have really adapted well, but obviously the limitations of equipment and technology and broadband and all those things, have limited our ability. So yeah, it's gone really well for our business, considering every piece of kit we put in, we've historically have had to face up and be there face to face, and it has taken away those opportunistic opportunities where you've got a group that you've planned, you go and you do the education with a group, but then some nurses, doctors might be running late or whatever, and you can catch them on the way out. You can do it again in the hospital, whereas remote, 1 hour, you've knocked off, you've lost them. So
yeah.
On the opposite side of the coin there, because you can do it remotely, you can do many sessions because you're not traveling backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So but again, you need to communicate that really clearly to the facility, so they know they've got that as an option. And you can maybe set multiple sessions, because it's not costing you to fly backwards and forwards. It's costing you for somebody to sit and basically be available for the day.
So you can do more training.
You can do a lot more training, reach more people, and the face-to-face thing, you miss out with groups because somebody's sick, whatever, and you can easily do that in a remote setup if you've got the setup right and if the hospital's got the setup right to receive that.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you. Fantastic. So Danny, in relation to pharma specifically, 2 weeks ago, a Pharma in Focus article talked about the pharma industry being on the brink of major changes to its sales force, including downsizing, retraining, and a shift in responsibilities, stating that 70% of people recently surveyed believe that face-to-face contact between pharma sales reps and healthcare practitioners would not return to pre-COVID levels ever, regardless of when restrictions cease, and that healthcare practitioners are increasingly looking for insights, not sales pitches. The article suggested that sales teams need to change their mindset and fine-tune their soft skills, and that they urgently need upskilling, as most sales reps have never sold virtually and are being led by people who have never sold virtually and are being trained by people that have never sold virtually. That the sales rep of the future will have a new role as an orchestrator, collaborating with MSLs to use their time more effectively. Danny, do you agree with this? And has Securus experienced in relation to this?
Yeah, so I did read that article. Look, at the risk of being controversial, I don't fully agree with that article. I do think, and I think Alex or everyone here has touched on it, I think to a degree perhaps devices are a little bit more modern and futuristic than perhaps more traditional pharma is. But, you know, I still think, and I think Alex said it as well, I think face-to-face still plays a really important part for our customers in seeing each other, but also in them seeing our teams. And so it comes back to what Alex said, is how do we continue to deliver value for them face-to-face, but embrace the digital side of things, because I do think it has changed. So we need to be able to do more of a blended offering to our customers. And I think from Greg's perspective, he's right. If you're training or we're educating, because we don't train, we tend to educate more so in our space, then you don't have to do it all face-to-face. You can do more virtually. We found that we can bring in global people a lot more easily. So up until to fly people over from overseas, it was impossible often to get dates. Australia is a massive country, maximising that opportunity was really difficult, where we've been able to be a lot more flexible about putting people in globally and doing that more regularly and offering much more variety and interest around that for our customers all around Australia. So I don't agree. I think face-to-face will still play an important part, but we do need to embrace digital more and have more virtual ability to interact with our customers. It's also been difficult. It's interesting for me to hear the device space. We've found it quite different with different customer groups, and I won't name them because that probably would be a little bit inappropriate, but we've found some specialist groups actually very embracing of digital and virtual, but we found a couple really not at all, and they found it actually really quite difficult to want to engage virtually with industry. So it's been a little bit checkered from that perspective as well, where others have really sort of said, yes, let's keep the interaction going, and they've worked with us to make it work. So it's been a little bit different across different therapy groups.
Oh, interesting. So are you finding that hospitals and primary care have their own resources to set up training and set up learning environments, or does it depend on the customer, as you're saying?
It's a little bit dependent, and I think Jonathan and Greg and Alex will have more knowledge around this. It's different in different states and different in different hospitals. So there's some hospitals have technology and they use Brexit and a range of different things, and they're really easy to deal with. And then there's others that have nothing, and then you have to try and work out how do you best set that up with them, and then there's quite a lot of barriers around that. And it's similar with primary care as well, which makes it difficult. It would be fantastic if we had one platform which worked for healthcare professionals that we could utilise. I mean, I think industry offers tremendous value for healthcare professionals, and therefore how we could do this better would be really useful, because certainly across all the states we find it very, very different and quite difficult in some areas.
Yeah, right.
I would agree with that. I think that you've noticed, I absolutely agree with that point, Danny, is that there's inconsistency across geographies especially, and probably in terms of the appetite to allow access into facilities, but also the embracing of technology. I'd probably draw a parallel and say that there is perhaps a correlation between where COVID has been worst and where it hasn't, in terms of, you know, you can almost draw a parallel between the border restrictions and where people haven't been allowed access to, and that's understandable. But I would absolutely say that there is.
Yeah, right.
I realised really early in the piece that you know, we on Zoom meetings most of our days, or Microsoft Teams or whatever, and we become very familiar. My office is set up with multiple screens, so I can pull things from a screen and it runs really smoothly. But I realized really quickly in the piece that my sales team didn't have those skills, right? We assumed they understand Zoom, but sure, they're just hitting a button and they're connecting. So I employed a company to come in, and we did it virtually over 3 days, and we taught my sales team how to sell virtually, how to engage, how to be prepared. I invested in additional monitors for their homes, laptop stands, proper cameras, so that if they're going to do it, they can do it professionally and they can be comfortable in doing it. And then we actually ran internally, we ran mock, sales training on these virtual camera setups, so that they could be comfortable to demonstrate or trial a piece of kit virtually. And we also realized from a customer perspective, you know, you'd send them a Zoom meeting and you'd have the discussion, okay, we're going to meet, we're going to do some training. But a lot of them, because we understand Zoom, a lot of them don't understand that you need a camera, microphone, etc. So they'd click into the Zoom meeting and they'll just have voice. And, you know, how do we see the piece of kit that they've got that we're going to, you know, work with them on? So we learned that we had to really put a process in place when we were going to do this with our customers so that they understood what the expectation was on our end and vice versa. So we had to put a lot of processes in place. And once we got that finessed, it really assisted the value to the customer and what we were meant to deliver.
So Greg, I might
will
get...
that change?
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, Greg, would that, sorry, Elizabeth, I don't mean
That's
to
all
keep
right.
going. Will that change the type of person that you're going to recruit for the future?
Absolutely. Technology, you know, they have to have a really good understanding, or we have to be able to train them, and yeah, it will change the line of questioning when we're looking at our staff to join our company, because they, you know, you mentioned Australia's a massive country, and it really is. And traditionally, a representative might do, you know, in Western Australia, the northern swing, you know, once a quarter. Now, face-to-face is never going to go away, but now they can potentially do 1 out of the 4 face-to-face and the other 3 virtually. Right? It benefits them. It gives them,
isn't it?
yeah, and it, you know, for me, it's also about your balance, your work-life balance. So if your representative does not need to travel and spend, you know, 5 weeks away and only spend 1 week away, they can use their time more effectively, and yeah, it benefits the business too, and it benefits their personal life.
Yeah, right.
So further to Danny's question, Greg, if you look at our experience that we just had recruiting for you, part of that job description talked about the comfort that the candidates would have, final candidate would have in being with Teams and with Zoom and with talking to camera and with all of that sort of stuff. We really needed to make sure that the people that we were putting forward to Greg had that level of comfort. So and that was in the JD. So that's to Danny's question. Yeah. And Jonathan, did I go to you on this one? So with your clinicians, I mean, does it depend on the customer? You know, the type of sort of what you can do and not do?
Yeah, I'll add to what I was talking about. There's no sort of hesitance from them to do it. I think, as Danny said, because we're dealing a lot with, we're working closely with interventional cardiologists who are used to these very technical equipment, and as well as vascular surgeons now with endovascular treatments. So they're all quite used to technology. It's just in terms of getting up to speed with it, I think it has taken some time. Often required that if we're to do a live broadcast, to have a third party to help get everyone on in time and get things connected. But what we have found is the chat function is often more used than the visual or the didactics. So they're often interacting via the chat, and then we'll open up and you'll have a lot more discussion once the questions come through. So that ability to be more interactive, the one click in the future will be a lot more effective. But generally I guess in the specialty groups that we work with, there's no real say laggards. I think those that do have issues with it, they'll have a younger registrar or someone come and help them, or someone will come and help them get up to speed. But I still think the technology's got a long way to go to get a lot more effective, and I think that'll happen, and you'll see it be a lot more seamless and easy to use.
Yeah, fantastic. If I can just share an example with you, very recently we had a catch up with 2 med device leaders in Queensland who were telling us about their recent experience with their hospital customers in relation to education. They recently won a HealthScope contract and had to make sure every applicable nurse across the relevant hospitals were trained on their product. They'd been experiencing some access issues for sure, so needed to come up with a plan to ensure their customers were offered this training because that was the product that they had to use as an sort of exclusive product in that therapy area. They organised absolutely everything, so they made it really easy for the hospitals. However, this wasn't without its challenges. Customer objections were around logistics, booking rooms in advance, which rooms were going to be available for the training, so for the nurses to go into the room? Was there social distancing in the room? Testing the technology to make sure it works. They provided the technology to the hospitals. They also worked with some hospitals who, in some cases, had their own audiovisual and IT people, but keeping in mind, as you guys would know, not all hospitals have those people. Many of their customers had never undertaken virtual training before, and many were very old school, saying, look, it's just too hard. So they had to get the numbs to release the nurses off the wards. So what they did was they kept the sessions to 20 minutes, which really helped, and they'd have 4 to 12 nurses in each session, depending on the size of the room. They ran a short video to introduce the product, because they obviously only had the 20 minutes. And then they had their territory managers demonstrate the product and answer questions. They ran the sessions at 7 a.m. So they got in at the time of the changeover. And what they did was they trained some of the nurses to be trainers. So they trained the trainers. And so for the night shift nurses, because the company didn't want the reps obviously working, 24/7, they got the trainer nurses to train the night shift nurses on that, when that shift handover was. So they said it was, it worked so well. And besides saving thousands of dollars on airfares and accommodation for numerous people to conduct this training, which is obviously what you've all said about, saving money. And Greg, as you mentioned, they could get through way more people. They could train way more people than they could have if they'd done face-to-face. Now, they then did a massive survey throughout Australia, and the feedback they received was outstanding, including documented survey results post the sessions, which showed that 96% of trainees said the training met their needs, and 87% said the training was as effective as face-to-face training. So I think that's a really good example. It took a lot of organising, but now they've done it, they can sort of, I guess, you'd replicate it for, all your training for, for that customer group, if you like. So Jonathan, are you finding that most customers are open to the hybrid learning model? I think we might have covered this, but some face-to-face, some virtual. I mean, are you still able to go in, and does it depend on the product solution that you're providing and the size of your audience?
Yeah, if it's a more technical product, then we've tried it. We've had some great innovations come through this year, built out of the US, with more technical procedures, say vessel closure, where there's a hybrid solution where there'll be some online portion that they'll learn on the procedure and the device, and then they're supplemented with face-to-face where you can. So I think the hybrid model is certainly the way of the future. I think whether it's face-to-face or online, it just needs to be seamless and have that one central portal to be able to go to. So certainly the hybrid solution for us, and it does differ via, I guess, how much concept selling and whether it's a really highly technical sell.
Okay, Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think just picking up on the example that you shared there about that company and the training that they delivered, I think it's a great example of getting aligned with the customer around what it is they actually need, and actually hearing the customer and understanding the constraints that they've got and what works best for them. And I think that is at the key to any education that the industry delivers to the customer. I think that keeping it short, and you talked about that, and I've heard this expression from my team recently around sort of nano education and nano portions, and keeping it really sort of bite-sized chunks to be able to get people to digest it. I think that's critical. And I think that you talked around doing it in a time frame that's suitable to the customers. These are the things that are going to make engaging with customers successful. And I think that's the challenge that industry is going to be faced with, is the days of just doing in-servicing in a room with people and turning up and not really planning it properly. I think those days may be gone. And so I think that it will help separate the organizations and the reps and the companies that are able to think about their customers' needs. We've just got to remember that the people that we're engaging with and trying to provide education to are primary healthcare workers, typically, who are flat out busy. They're short on time. They're resource poor. They don't have the technology and the access. So we've got to think on our feet about how do we actually provide that as a value service to them.
Yeah.
I don't think that change.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Greg.
So, going to the other side of the spectrum, a distributor of mine in the veterinary space to do both education and sales has come up with a concept of basically the kit in a box, right? So if when he could not get to a particular place, he would provide them with the piece of kit that he wants to demonstrate or train on. He would freight that, and there would be a box associated with it, with a screen, with a 4G connector, with pretty much everything connected. So they'd open the box, they'd hit one button, and everything would turn on, and he would have a video conferencing facility with them. So that was taking care of the technology side. Now, obviously, that you would have to replicate something like that with every rep to be able to do that, or fewer reps. But that's another way. And I think in the future, you might start seeing more professional kits going out to facilities. The robotics, you're starting to see that internationally, where a robot's in a facility in an operating theatre and you're communicating through this device. So I think we've got to be open-minded. Face-to-face is always going to be there. I think the numbers of staff we have will always be required, but I think we need to think about embracing technology, because you can get to more people quicker. So from a sales perspective, if you can do 10 calls in a day, 5 of which are virtual, it beats hands down, a year ago where you could only see 5 people because you were driving places and trying to find parking and all these sorts of things. So I think both on a sales side and an education side, virtual will be embraced moving forward, and we just got to overcome all of these technical hurdles.
Yeah. Greg, can you talk to us about your creative way and what you've set up at your office, so for your people to educate their customers and with installations and all that type of thing? Obviously, you've got, maybe you just want to just tell the audience what Fujifilm's on a site do.
Right, sure. So we sell point-of-care ultrasound devices. So these are ultrasound machines that are traditionally sold into radiology, but in our world, point-of-care is sold to non-radiology type people, right? So education is even more important. And when you're training, you need to be able to show the device, you need to be able to show the buttons, and you also need to be able to show what is being what is on the screen. If you're scanning your arm as an example, you want to be able to see. So there's multiple bits of information that the end user needs to see. Now, technically, it was quite challenging setting up this little studio. We soon learned that, using even a high definition webcam, it doesn't work because these things autofocus. And if you're trying to focus on a screen, which is a menu screen, and every time they touch a button, it was going out of focus. So we had to go to like an SLR type camera that you can fix the focus, and we needed multiple cameras so that if you wanting to show them the full machine or you wanted to show them another angle, we needed that. And then we needed to be able to transmit the information from the scan. So the information that's portrayed on the screen. So that all of this needed to go into an electronic box where a single operator could easily switch between cameras. So my clinical people have got 2 setups like this. They can go into a room, they can sit in front of the device, they roll the particular device into the room that they want to demonstrate or train on. The cameras and the lights are very important. And that's another thing, lighting. If you have a camera on something that's black, silver, and gray, the cameras inherently try to focus on different things. So you almost need to understand the technology to be able to really send a good image so that it's beneficial at the learning end. So we needed multiple cameras. We needed proper studio lights so that you could light up the whole device. So whether you're moving the camera up or down, it doesn't struggle with seeing something black, seeing something dark, and the other person on the other end either having a black screen or a white screen. So there was a lot of technology that we needed to consider, and we learned the hard way. I bought different devices, my team bought different devices until we managed to get it. We actually went to an external company to help us design this whole thing and put it together. Once we got that, we replicated it in 2 different states. So whether the customers in New Zealand or Western Australia, somebody will be able to deliver, the education required. And I put one of each device into their home studio, and so they were set up. They were set up to be able to accommodate any of our devices, any time of the day or night. And some of my clinical said, well, if I've got to start at 3 in the morning to accommodate whatever, that's fine. I'll catch the time up in the afternoon. So I was very comfortable with that, and it did take a lot of fiddling around to get the technology set, but there's lots of companies that can help with that. We just did it internally, and yeah, Elizabeth, you've seen what we've got with the cameras and and
yeah,
it was important
I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. It was important to set it up for me, for one person, because I've got very limited clinical staff, so they needed to be able to go into a room and operate everything easily on their own, not have multiple cameramen in a television studio, because they also needed to be able to do it quickly. They take a call today, in 3 hours time, can you provide education? Sure. It's not a whole setup where you got to get a company in to come and help you and plan it and all the rest. So we could do a lot more education, a lot more frequently, because we had that ability.
Yeah, and I think you've got a set place in the office for it. It doesn't get taken down. It's there all the time. So once you want to do it, you just go, and that's the training room. That's what you do. That's what I love about it.
And I mean, when we were recruiting for the last person, and that was one of the things we were asking them. If you're living in a state where I don't have a physical office, have you got space in your home to set it up, and will you be prepared to do that? Yeah. It's going to make your life easier. You're going to travel less. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. I've got this area I can sort out.
Exactly right. That's what happened. Yeah. Does anyone have any sort of, besides what Fujifilm sort of done with the set up room with the cameras and lights, any new and creative ways of delivering education that you can share with us? I think someone mentioned, and I think it was Jonathan, holograms. Did you mention holograms?
Yeah, so it's a holosight. It's the glasses that are used for real-time communication between surgeons in proctoring and other areas. So that is one area that the company is started using in the US for proctoring. So instead of going to a computer and sending off and having everything there, they can be in the lab and transmit the relevant data and talk between physicians as they proctor on products. So that's one technology that is being used. But the OCT, one of our technologies is intravascular imaging, which is quite complex imaging inside the arteries in coronary procedures, and the training for that is quite difficult in getting the right cases, and there's a lot to learn and take up. So the company started using virtual reality for that, and that's starting to really improve the cognitive ability of the users, as well as knowledge retention. And they've done a study of 11 sites in the US now to look at case outcomes and results and accuracy in other areas. And we're seeing quite a proliferation of that sort of technology in areas like OCT. We're going to see that over the next 5 years. I think that the VR technology start to get a lot more popular for that immersive experience, where they can really lock away, do a lot of cases, have input from all over the world, the best centers, into those algorithms and cases that they have at their disposal in the virtual world. So that's one area that we're using, and the Hololens hasn't got here yet, but I think it will be here. Well, it may have actually Greg or Alex or Danny may have seen it here, but the Hololens is a technology that I think will be more popular for things like proctoring and other areas where you can't access like you would formerly into the hospital for those more complex procedures.
And Danny or Alex, do you know about that? I don't.
No, I don't.
Alex?
And I'm not aware of that, but I do think that, to Jonathan's point, I think that type of technology will develop quickly for real-time live education. And I think that case support and case coverage and being in procedure rooms and theatres to be able to deliver value there and then in a live way, but remotely, I think that type of technology will be very, very powerful. The other technology that I just looked at recently that is interesting, and it's probably less appealing for certainly from an implant or maybe even therapeutic device point of view, but for quick short videos, there's a company called Shoot Stuff that I've been looking at. I don't know whether you guys have seen them or not, but they'll turn around videos within 24 hours and make them really quite professional. So you can film just on your iPhone, and it goes off to a cloud, and it kind of takes away this issue of creating large video files, whether it's education or training for a particular product or a particular procedure, and it makes it much more accessible for the recipient, and it looks really quite professional. So it's a subscription-based technology that I think has had some success.
Alex, how do you spell that?
Shootsta. It's SHOOSTA.
Okay,
so they've been around for, I think, 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
They're an interesting company working in terms of being able to use videos and make them available very quickly.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We've got a lot of questions that are coming through, and I've got a question or 2 questions from someone who sent it to me, as I said at the beginning, a participant that is with us today. So I'm just going to go to his question now. He says that a lot of training in the past year has been provided remotely via Zoom or Teams with variable levels of success. For example, education sessions are easier than device training when performed remotely. With increasingly tighter IT security in hospitals, how do you see the offering of remote education change or develop in 2021? Alex, can I go back to you on this one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think the IT security is a different question internally to rep access. I think that it will be something that unfolds with lots of mistakes that are made. I think that we as an organisation are extraordinarily conscious right now of the number of cyber attacks that are happening. We've certainly changed and pivoted on some of our cyber security internally, and I suspect that all organisations, hospitals and healthcare facilities included, are doing the same. So I do think that it's a good question, and I do think that there will likely be some challenges. I think mainstream technology like we're using today will probably be, fairly accessible. I think if it's web-based and it's this type of dialogue where it's live and education is based on that type of medium, then it will probably be okay. I think file sharing, like I just described, that might be a different type of challenge. So I think it'll be one of those challenges that increases. I think the level of cybersecurity risk is definitely a real threat. And I think that the amount of phishing that's happening, if you read some of the articles in the market right now, is definitely a real problem. So I don't know that I've got any real good answers to it, or whether that answers your question. I'm interested in what the others say.
That's all right. That's all right. I don't think there's any, concrete answers to any of these things. We're all just sort of finding our way, aren't we? But Greg, do you have any thoughts on that, or any knowledge about the IT security in hospitals and how you see that, affecting education?
Well, it certainly did. We all heard on the media Zoom with the cyber attacks through Zoom, etc., and a number of states started shutting down. And in our organisation, we only have access to Zoom. We're on a Google platform. We're changing to Microsoft, but I could download MS Teams, but I couldn't invite external participants to join a meeting. So it was useless. So if there was a facility that didn't allow Zoom, I needed them to set their meeting and invite me. So, I think there needs to be dialogue at the administration level, industry and administration, because I think this is going to be moving forward 100%, this virtual world. Security is always going to be an issue. So we're definitely going to have to start engaging, health at government level, through industry to set up systems that are safe and that we can all work, because it's to everybody's benefit, right? More access, it's safer, less people in hospitals. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Look, let's go on to our question and answers here. Sorry, questions, I should say, and answers from you guys. Okay. So Greg, someone's asking which vendor you use to the virtual sales training. So I'll get that information off you, and when I send through the follow-up email to this record and with the recording, I'll send that information to everybody. Okay, sorry, just bear with me. I'm trying to read these questions here. So we have someone who said, this is probably more for Danny, we are finding that younger rookie reps are embracing the opportunity of working in a virtual and face-to-face, so a hybrid way, and getting great results, while the experienced group are more rusty on ideas about the way things should work. How are you finding this, and are you helping people evolve their approach, or are you having to switch people out?
Yeah, it's a great question. A little bit. I mean, I do think the young, as we know, I mean, I have two young boys or men, and the young certainly are much more au fait with the digital and the technology, and also I think more comfortable to take risks, or what we would deem as risks, where some of the more experienced representatives have more fear around what if we can't set this up or where there's a problem. So it's been, to Greg's point, important that we've internally trained everyone so they feel confident enough to do this. Also, from a professional point of view, there's nothing worse than setting up a meeting with customers and then doing it badly, where you know your bandwidth isn't enough and everything's not in sync, or people can't ask questions properly. So we have, I think it was Greg, we sort of learned through mistakes and got better at this. But I still think we've got a mixture of people who are at the more mature end, but are technically very strong and have done a very good job, and they've got great relationships with their customers as well. So they've been able to navigate through that. So I don't think it's that black and white, but the younger certainly are digitally strong, and they do like to have a crack, which is great. They're enthusiastic about the digital space, which I think we need. We can't keep doing everything the same way.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from one of our Ramsay participants. How do you see the virtual education training of capital equipment manifest in cost savings for hospital operators? This should relate to decreases in the cost and repairs and maintenance costs. So if I'll go to Greg on that one, given your...
I'm almost sure I know where this question's coming from too.
Do you want me to read it again?
No, I've got it. Look, at the moment, the uptake is fairly mediocre. Although we're probably doing 3 to 4 virtual sessions a week at the moment, where we're doing, multiple times more face-to-face where we can. Will it start cutting out, will it start lowering the cost of the devices we're selling? No. The reason for that is we'll be reaching more people and being able to do it, more frequently. So I think the level of education will be better and increase. When I say no on the price point, who knows what the future holds, right? But if we're all saving money, there can absolutely be a benefit for everybody, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys on the call, but our T&E cost this year past was ridiculous in comparison to prior years. But every time we've done this virtual thing, even though it's gone really well, the customer's appetite to still see us face to face is still there. They're going, oh, this was great, but when you can travel and when you're allowed to come into the hospital, we want to see you. So we need to get past that, and I think we will ultimately. And then the next phase of how much are we saving as a company, and how much can we pass on through the customer, through the device. And again, it's listening to your customer. Right? The amount of training and education we're doing today, is that meeting the need? If not, and I'd suggest in many instances, it's probably just enough because the time constraints. But if we're adding more, I think the efficiencies will be felt within the hospitals. If we're educating and helping through workflows, etc. So there's a lot of unknowns, but I think there's definitely a benefit for everybody if we embrace this more.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. If I could just ask Alex this one. Have your internal education field teams had to upskill their capabilities in tech education? What follow-up is required to embed training given challenges in face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we actually moved BlueJeans at the start of we moved from a technology called BlueJeans to Zoom at the start of last year. So we did some training and some education around Zoom technology because we were moving that platform anyway, not necessarily because of COVID. So I think that to the point that's been made previously, some of it's trial and error, and I think people have worked it out on the go. And I think that when we started this call today, people are working things out on the go, and so I don't know that that's necessarily any different for our reps. I do think that our sales team have probably struggled a little bit more in terms of feeling confident using the technology with customers than perhaps our clinical team have. And I think that comes from the fact that the clinical team talking to clinicians, that connection of peer-to-peer is strong. Whereas for a sales rep, they use and judge so much in terms of their cues when they're actually physically in a hospital. They can see what's happening in the environment. They can see the mood that the staff are in, and they pick up so many cues by doing that. Whereas when you set up a meeting and people are just dialing in and you hope it all goes smoothly, you're not quite sure what you're going to get. And so I think that the confidence level around being able to adopt that technology has probably been harder for our reps than it has perhaps for our clinicians. But I think that the points that Greg made around educating and training to ensure that you minimize some of the pitfalls and some of the things that can go wrong, and not just assuming that the person on the other end knows how to use the technology, I think that's really valid. I made a couple of notes on here, and Greg, I value understanding who you use to do that. Those are my questions.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't know, can someone help me with this one? Do you believe that CPMs, I presume it's clinical product managers, I think, do you believe that clinical product managers are using COVID-19 as an excuse to continue blocking entry into hospitals? And how long do you think that will continue for? Or how long can that continue for? Anyone?
I wouldn't think so. I would think they're following protocol, and I think that'd be the hospital protocol around access, and we've got to respect that as companies and find that time when we can access. So I think there'd be a reason for that, for those delaying entry and also having access protocols. So actually, I saw another question there on MTAA around changes to training and education. That's an interesting one, because that COVID part of the code is really being updated and is being changed in accordance with what's happened in the last year and what's happening. So things like access and hospital access and protocols are part of that code, as will training. So that's a document in process, but I think you'll see a lot more around interaction and training and how we do that, and cyber security, other areas. So
yeah, exactly. So I'll just read that question so everyone knows what it is. So have you Jonathan, that's really good. I was coming to that one next. Have you seen examples where training and education idea seemed like a good one until you looked into ensuring compliance with either MTAA or Medicines Australia codes? Are the codes up to date with the new normal for delivering training and education? Danny, do you know anything about the Medicines Australia part of that?
No, I don't. Sorry, I can't update you on that. Sorry.
That's all right. Okay, moving on from you. No, no, that's all right. No worries at all. It's I would imagine that it's incredibly difficult to keep up with MTAA and Medicines Australia codes and exactly what's what at any one time. Does anyone know about the MTAA? Any issues in relation to compliance there with training and education from Greg, Alex, or Jonathan?
I don't believe they're from a compliance perspective. I mean, you're delivering training and education. The outcomes are set. You're delivering the product, and you're doing what you need to do. So I don't know that I don't believe there are any restrictions in terms of doing this remotely. But I stand corrected. I don't know whether the MTAA have added in.
I agree. And from an MA point of view, it's just making sure that we're in line with MA code. So it would be the same from a device perspective as well.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue that comes up is privacy, and just making sure, and it's cyber security, and just making sure as organisations we've thought that through. But obviously a lot of our organisations are conservative from that perspective anyway, for their own protection.
Yeah. I think it'll come into play if you are doing something remotely and the device or is being used on a patient. All of those pre-consent, I think that's where that might come into play. But so far in our world, we've not been able. I mean, ordinarily we would do that in a hospital, but in the remote setting, we would be doing that with the clinician only scanning themselves and not patients. So,
and I think I'd add to that, Greg, that each of our companies have privacy codes that probably far outweigh what the MTAA has in place at the moment. So
correct,
and that's catching up to each of the privacy codes in each of the companies. So
yeah, right, okay. just past 12, so let's just have one more question. What does the panel feel about customer fatigue with virtual training? So when your customers are approached by multiple companies, pharma and device, who wish to virtually promote and educate on their specific products, all to the same healthcare practitioner group, is the advancement and frequency of virtual going to be too much? This is not what this person has said, but I would have thought, is it different to face-to-face? Because as Greg said, you can educate more and you've got more time to do more people. Or is it that they're going to notice a massive difference from face-to-face to virtual, as in fatigue of training?
I think with the fatigue thing, it's like all of us, right? We've been on that many Zoom meetings, we all zoomed out, and you know, it's a common sort of language we use. And I think that's why it's really important that when we do deliver, we deliver it succinctly. We stay on point when we're delivering this education, and we keep it short. And you need to mix these virtual things up, right? So you know, 1 or 2 slides, then bring a video in, do some live, because that keeps people engaged.
Yeah.
And I think the companies that do that really well will be the ones that, you know, your customers will accept your 20-minute update or whatever it might be over and above the others that are come on and bore you, frankly.
Yeah, and as Alex said before, your team was saying nano chunks, so you do things in little chunks, Alex, you were saying before, so maybe that's the way, right? So we're not doing, like, you know, masses of, you know, education. Alex, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, look, I agree. I think that, again, we just need to be cognizant of the demands on the customers. Because, you know, there's just a whole different dynamic when you used to have an education or a clinical training session previously, and people would be, you know, just simple things like more able to move around, and they'd be able to get up and go to the bathroom more easily, and you know, just that simple stuff. Whereas, you know, when you're in a Zoom discussion like this, you're sitting down, you're staring at a screen.
Yeah.
And the only way people know that you're present is when you're actually looking at the screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a different dynamic. And I think that to put demands on, especially clinical nurses, their time to be able to do this repetitively, I think that they're going to need to manage their own time, and we're going to have to be conscious of the impact that it has on them. So that'll be fair comment.
And I think that's why hospitals really need to be set up with dedicated spaces for virtual, so that, you know, the nurses, the doctors are not worrying about the technology. They walk into a room and it's there, it's all set up, and they're engaging with us, right? Yeah,
straight away. Yeah, exactly. Danny, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, I think people are zoomed out at the moment because there's been so remote, but as it balances out and there's a mixture between face-to-face and remote, then I think people will embrace it again a little bit more. So it's finding that sort of that nice fit, I think, is where we've got to get, because we won't be in a space where everyone's just on virtual, you know, from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night. People will be doing face-to-face, and then they might choose to have the morning or the evening virtually, and therefore there's a nice mixture. And then if you're doing a good job, like Greg is talking about, we're mixing it up, people see the benefits of that. So we're going to move into a different phase, I think.
Yeah, right. I think you know, it might end up being like Netflix. You know, you have on-demand training. Jonathan, any thoughts?
No, I think Alex said earlier around getting the voice of customer, and so hearing from the customers what has worked, what hasn't, and then analysing that feedback, and then repeating, doing what you need to with the changes, and make those changes, but then make sure you're continually improving. So I think whether it's shorter or more of a hybrid solution, but just really listening to what the customer's feeding back and what they're getting out of that training.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's 12:06. I think we have to wrap up. It's been fantastic. We've kept all of our attendees for the whole time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I'm really thanks so much to Alex, Danny, Greg, and Jonathan for today. Really great insights. You've been amazing. And I'll send out an email with the bits and pieces that people are requesting. I can see there's more questions. So thanks, guys, so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Right, thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Everybody, bye. Nice to meet you.
Bye.